All right, sweetheart, who's this man to you?
He's my dad.
Is he making you say that?
No.
Sir, I'm going to need some proof she's your daughter, birth certificate, custody paperwork, something. If you can't show me, you're getting put in cuffs.
Before we proceed, where in the world are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We love knowing who this story is reaching. And if you believe that a father celebrating his child's birthday should never be treated like a criminal, keep reading. This one matters. There's a specific kind of Saturday morning peace that only exists inside a neighborhood diner. The clatter of ceramic plates. The smell of coffee, so strong it greets you before the door swings shut. Low voices folding into each other across worn vinyl booths. Conversations that go nowhere and everywhere at the same time. That was Rosa's kitchen on the corner of Maplewood and Fifth. The kind of place where the regulars didn't need menus and the waitstaff remembered your order before you sat down. In the corner window booth, the one with the crack in the vinyl that management kept forgetting to fix, the one that caught the morning light just right between 8 and 9, sat Marcus Okafor. 54 years old, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. A cup of black coffee already half empty beside him. Across the table, his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, was attempting to balance an entire spoonful of whipped cream on her nose without sneezing. She was failing spectacularly. She didn't care at all. Marcus was watching her the way parents watch their children when they think no one is watching them. Quietly, completely, with a kind of love that doesn't need to say anything to fill an entire room. Their regular server, Denise, had already slipped a paper crown onto Lily's head the moment they walked through the door. Pink and gold and slightly too big, tilted now at an angle that suggested royalty with a sense of humor. Denise knew. She always knew. 3 years of Saturday mornings had a way of building that kind of knowing. Today, Lily was turning 6. What most people in Rosa's kitchen that morning didn't know. What most people in the county, frankly, didn't know unless they had stood in his courtroom, was that Marcus Okafor had spent the last 14 years as a circuit court judge. 14 years of watching people walk through heavy wooden doors carrying the weight of their worst moments, their biggest mistakes, their most desperate circumstances. 14 years of learning to read a room before it read itself to you. Of listening for what wasn't being said just as carefully as what was. He was patient the way only men who have sat in judgment of others learn to be patient. Measured, unhurried, a man who never used 10 words when 3 would do. But that wasn't what Saturday was about. Saturday was about the whipped cream, the crown, the birthday pancakes Lily had been talking about since Wednesday. For years earlier, Marcus's world had shifted on its axis in the span of a single evening. His oldest friend, Jerome Calloway, a man he had known for 32 years, a man who was less a friend and more a brother in every sense of the word that actually counts, had been in a car accident on Route 9. Jerome's wife was killed at the scene. Jerome himself was rushed into surgery, and by the time Marcus made it to the hospital, the doctors were already speaking in that careful, measured language that only gets used when there is very little time left. Jerome lasted 6 hours. In those 6 hours, he didn't ask Marcus about arrangements. He didn't talk about paperwork or finances or logistics. He reached for Marcus's hand and asked for one thing. His daughter, Lily, was 2 years old. She was with a neighbor. And Jerome Calloway looked at the closest person he had in this world and said he could not let her go to strangers. He could not let her grow up without someone who already loved her. Marcus said yes before Jerome finished the sentence. 20 months of fostering. Then the adoption finalized. Then the Saturday morning Marcus sat in this exact booth and told Denise. And Denise cried in her apron, and Lily ate an entire stack of blueberry pancakes and had no idea what any of it meant yet. Only that her daddy was smiling, and that was enough for her. Now she was 6, whipped cream on her nose, crown tilted left, reaching across the table to steal bacon off Marcus's plate like she thought he wasn't looking. He noticed. He let her take it anyway. That was the scene that Officer Derek Salter walked into. Salter, 7 years on the Maplewood Police Department, had taken the call at 8:47 that morning. The dispatch note was vague to the point of meaning almost nothing. A concerned patron at Rosa's kitchen. Situation looked unusual. No crime described. He drove over. He walked through the door. His eyes moved across the room and landed on the window booth. He didn't stop at the host stand, didn't speak to the manager, didn't ask a single staff member what the supposed disturbance was, or whether they'd seen anything concerning, or whether there was even a disturbance at all. He walked directly to Marcus's booth and stopped at the edge of the table, standing over both of them. "Excuse me, sir. I need to ask you some questions about this child." Marcus set down his coffee and looked up. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" Salter didn't answer him. He turned to Lily instead. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" Lily looked at her dad, then back at the officer. Lily, do you know this man?" "That's my daddy." "Is he really your daddy? Or is that what he told you to say?" Lily turned to Marcus, her small brow furrowed with the specific confusion of a child watching the world stop, making sense for no reason she could understand. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Marcus's hand moved across the table toward hers. "Everything's fine, Button. Keep eating." Then he looked back at Salter, still calm, still completely measured, but something behind his eyes had shifted. The particular stillness of a man who has understood exactly what kind of situation he is in. "Officer, she is my legally adopted daughter. My name is Marcus Okafor. I'm happy to show you my identification. I'll need to see that. And I need you to explain your relationship to this child." Marcus produced his driver's license without breaking eye contact and placed it on the table. Salter picked it up, examined it. "This doesn't confirm she's your daughter. My driver's license shows my name and my address. Her last name is also Okafor. We live at the same address. I have her adoption documents on my phone if you need to see them." "How long have you had the child?" Something moved across Marcus's face. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter than anger. "How long have I had my daughter?" 3 years since the adoption finalized. "And before that, I fostered her for 20 months. On what basis are you questioning me, officer?" Salter didn't answer. He looked at Lily again, then back at Marcus. Then he reached for his radio. "I have a possible child abduction situation at Rosa's kitchen on Maplewood. Need backup. Male suspect on scene with minor female." The word abduction landed in the diner like something physical. Customers stopped eating. Someone near the counter gasped. Denise, standing at the kitchen entrance with a coffee pot in her hand, covered her mouth. Marcus Wells sat completely still. He looked at Lily. She was looking back at him, her hand reaching across the table to find his. Not crying, but her eyes were wide and searching, sensing that something was terribly wrong the way children sense things before they can name them. She held onto his hand and didn't let go. He covered her hand with both of his. "Everything is fine, Button." Then he looked at Salter, and his voice dropped to something so quiet and so precise it cut through every sound in that diner. "You just called a child abduction code on me in front of my daughter." Outside, the backup sirens were already getting closer, and every phone in Rosa's kitchen was recording. Backup arrived in under 2 minutes. 2 officers pushed through the diner door, and before either of them had a chance to assess what they were walking into, Salter was already at the entrance meeting them, already talking, already building his version of events. Unidentified male, white female minor, refusing to cooperate, possibly fraudulent documentation. By the time the 2 officers looked across the diner at Marcus Okafor, they were already seeing him through Salter's eyes. What they actually saw was a 54-year-old man sitting calmly in a booth. His daughter's small hand held in both of his. A half-eaten plate of birthday pancakes on the table between them. A paper crown tilted sideways on a little girl's head. No raised voice. No aggression. No distress from the child beyond the wide, uncertain eyes of a 6-year-old who didn't understand why strangers kept interrupting her birthday breakfast. As the officers approached, Marcus spoke first. He didn't wait to be addressed. "My name is Marcus Okafor. This is my daughter, Lily Okafor. I have already provided identification to Officer Salter. I have offered to show her adoption documents. There is no abduction. There is no disturbance. There never was." One of the backup officers looked at the adoption document Marcus had pulled up on his phone, read it carefully, and then looked over at Salter with an expression that was asking a question Salter didn't want to answer. The other officer stayed quiet and kept his eyes on Marcus. Salter didn't back down. He told the backup officers that Marcus had been obstructive from the first moment, that he had refused direct orders, that his behavior had been suspicious throughout the interaction. Marcus responded to each point the same way, quietly, specifically, without raising his voice once. He had answered every question. He had provided identification. He had offered documentation. He had declined to leave his 6-year-old daughter alone at a restaurant table, and declining that was not obstruction under any statute Salter could name. Denise had heard enough. She walked directly over from the kitchen entrance and told the officers that Marcus and Lily came to this diner every single Saturday morning, that she had been their server for 3 years, that she had watched the adoption happen in real time, and that Marcus Okafor had done absolutely nothing wrong from the moment he walked through the door. A customer from the adjacent booth, a man who said he had seen them there more times than he could count, backed her up without being asked. A woman 2 tables over, who had been recording since the moment Salter first approached, told the officers she had the entire interaction on video and that it showed exactly what it looked like: a black man being questioned for sitting with his white daughter. None of it slowed Salter down. He told Marcus to stand up. Marcus asked him to state the legal basis. Salter said obstruction and failure to comply with a lawful order. Marcus told him calmly and clearly that no lawful order had been given, that a request to abandon his daughter at a table was not a lawful order, and that he had violated no law by declining it. Salter told him again to stand up. And when Marcus didn't move, Salter reached into the booth, grabbed him by the arm, and pulled. Lily didn't scream. She made a sound that was smaller than a scream and worse. A sharp, frightened intake of breath, and her eyes filled with tears as she reached across the table for her father's hand and found it being pulled away from her. She didn't cry, but her chin trembled, and her eyes stayed locked on Marcus the way a child's eyes lock onto the one person they trust when the world stops making sense. Marcus looked back at her for exactly 1 second. "It's okay, Button. Stay there." Then he looked at Salter, and every person in that diner heard what he said next. "My name is Marcus Okafor. I'm a circuit court judge in this county. I have served on the bench for 14 years. You are arresting me without probable cause, and every person in this room is a witness." Salter put him in handcuffs anyway. Sergeant Patricia Webb arrived 11 minutes after the backup call. 23 years on the force. She walked through the door of Rosa's kitchen, expecting a routine situation that had gotten slightly out of hand. What she walked into was a room of 30-something customers sitting in dead silence. 14 phones still recording. A 6-year-old girl with a birthday crown on her head, crying quietly into a waitress's shoulder. And a handcuffed man sitting at a window booth with the stillness of someone who had already decided exactly what was going to happen next. Webb scanned the room. Her eyes landed on Marcus, then on the handcuffs, then on Lily. She crossed the diner without speaking to Salter first. "Sir, can you tell me what happened here?" Marcus looked up at her. "Your officer responded to a call with no described crime. He approached me and my daughter without cause. He ignored my identification, ignored my documentation, ignored 3 years of staff witness testimony, called an abduction code on a legally adopted child sitting with her legal father, and arrested me for asking him to justify it. That is what happened here." Webb turned to Salter. "What do you have?" Salter started talking. The call, the suspicious behavior, the refusal to cooperate, the documentation he couldn't verify on site. Webb listened. Then she turned back to Marcus and asked one question. "What's your full name?" "Marcus Okafor." Webb went still for just a moment. She pulled out her phone, typed something, and looked at the screen. What came up was the county court website, and on it, clear as anything, was a photograph of the man sitting handcuffed in front of her. The Honorable Marcus Okafor, circuit court judge, 14 years on a bench. She looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she looked at Salter. She didn't say anything out loud. She didn't need to. She walked him to the far end of the diner, away from every customer and every phone, and spoke to him in a low voice that carried more weight than any shout could manage. Salter's face moved through several expressions in fast succession. Defense, then confusion, then something that looked like the slow and sickening realization of a man watching the floor open up beneath him. What came back? She crouched down, so she was at eye level with Marcus, and spoke quietly. "Judge Okafor, I'm removing the handcuffs right now, and I am deeply sorry for what happened here today." She uncuffed him personally. Marcus stood, straightened his jacket, and walked directly to Lily. He took her from Denise's arms and held her, and she buried her face in his neck and held on with both hands. He rubbed her back and said nothing for a moment, just held his daughter in the middle of that diner while everyone watched in complete silence. The birthday crown was still on her head, slightly more tilted than before. He didn't fix it yet. He just held her. Then he turned around. "I want every badge number in this room documented. I want Sergeant Webb's report filed before end of day. And I want it noted clearly that I identified myself as a circuit court judge before the handcuffs went on." He looked at Salter, who was standing near the door, not moving, not speaking. "You heard me tell you who I was. You heard my daughter tell you who I was. You heard the staff tell you who I was. And you put me in handcuffs anyway, in front of my daughter on her birthday." The diner was so quiet you could hear the coffee machine humming behind the counter. "My title should not have been what protected me today. My rights as a human being should have been enough. But you couldn't see my rights. You could only see my skin." He picked up Lily's birthday crown from the table where it had fallen, placed it carefully back on her head, and looked at Sergeant Webb one final time. "You'll be hearing from my attorney." Then he walked out. The video was everywhere before noon. 14 different angles. 14 different phones. All of them capturing the same moments. A black man in handcuffs, a 6-year-old girl with a paper crown reaching for her father, and an officer who had been told exactly who he was dealing with and had pressed forward anyway. By Sunday morning, the footage had been viewed 9 million times. By Monday, it had more than doubled. Every major news outlet ran the story, and the image they all led with was the same one: Lily's hand reaching across the table as the handcuffs went on. The caption wrote itself. The department released a statement Monday afternoon calling the incident deeply concerning and promising a full internal investigation. It was the kind of statement that uses a great many words to say very little. But the investigation that followed was not something they could manage or contain. And what it uncovered made the incident at Rosa's kitchen look less like a beginning and more like the end of a very long story. Salter's personnel file revealed 5 prior welfare check calls on black men with white children over his 7-year career. All 5 had been cleared. All 5 were documented. None of them had ever been examined as a pattern. The department had the information in a file, had reviewed it at various points, and had done nothing with it. Now that same file was being read by attorneys, journalists, and a federal civil rights investigator who had seen the footage and opened an inquiry without waiting to be asked. Salter was suspended without pay within 48 hours. He was terminated within 3 weeks. The official findings cited violation of department use of force policy, submission of a false incident report. He had described Marcus as aggressive and uncooperative, which the footage disproved in the first 30 seconds, and a documented pattern of racially discriminatory conduct. He was 31 years old with 7 years on the force and no viable path back into law enforcement. The department that had ignored 5 prior complaints and handed him the tools to do this offered him no defense. Marcus's legal team filed the federal civil rights lawsuit 2 weeks after the incident. The charges covered unlawful detention, false arrest, violation of 4th and 14th Amendment rights, racial discrimination under color of law, and emotional distress inflicted on a minor child. The city's legal team reviewed what they were facing: 14 videos, 30-plus witness statements, a personnel file full of unaddressed red flags, and an incident report that contradicted every frame of recorded footage, and made the calculation that no jury in the country was going to rule in their favor. They settled for $1.3 million within 100 days of the filing. Marcus donated the majority of the settlement to 2 organizations, one providing legal support to victims of racial profiling, and one funding trauma therapy specifically for children who had experienced distressing police encounters. The remainder went into a college fund for Lily. He returned to the bench and said very little publicly after his statement outside the courthouse on the day the settlement was announced. He said he hoped the reforms the city had agreed to, mandatory bias training, revised protocols for ambiguous welfare calls, and an independent review board for discrimination complaints, would mean something real for the next person. He said the next person probably wouldn't be a judge. He said that was exactly the point. Lily turned 7 the following year. Marcus took her to Rosa's kitchen. Same booth, same birthday crown, same extra whipped cream on the pancakes. Denise had saved their table, the way she always did. The diner had placed a small handwritten card in the center of the booth. It said, "Reserved, Okafor family." It's still there. Some people never go back to the place where something like that happened to them. Marcus went back because he refused to let Derek Salter take that too. Because that booth was his and Lily's long before that Saturday morning. And it would be theirs long after. Because Rosa's kitchen on a Saturday with his daughter and a tilted paper crown and stolen bacon was not something that belonged to what happened. It belonged to them. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to understand that Black fathers exist, that Black love is real, and that dignity should never be conditional on a title or a resume or a robe. What changes would you demand from your city's police department? Drop them in the comments. And if you believe every father deserves to celebrate his daughter's birthday in peace, without fear, without justification, without having to prove he belongs, share this. Keep passing it on. We will keep telling these stories until the systems that make them necessary have no choice but to change.